The morning billionaire Adrian Cole announced that he was going to choose a wife. 43 women arrived at the glass headquarters of Cole Meridian expecting diamonds, cameras, and a chance at becoming one of the richest women in America. By noon, Adrian had forgotten every one of their names. The only woman he could not stop thinking about was the assistant standing beside him with a tablet in one hand, correcting his disastrous plan in front of the entire room. "You cannot interview a wife the way you interview a chief financial officer," Claire Bennett whispered without moving her smile. Adrian glanced toward her. "Why not?" "Because wives usually object to performance reviews." For the first time that morning, the famously controlled billionaire almost laughed. That should have been the end of it. Claire was his executive assistant, the smartest person in his office, and the one woman who had absolutely no interest in marrying him. But when Adrian looked at the carefully selected candidates waiting across the ballroom, then back at Claire's calm gray eyes, an uncomfortable thought struck him with the force of lightning. He had spent 6 weeks searching for the perfect woman to become Mrs. Adrian Cole. Somehow, he had never considered that she might already be standing 3 feet away. At 36, Adrian had built Cole Meridian into one of the largest privately held real estate and hospitality companies in the United States. Business magazines described him as disciplined, strategic, and impossible to surprise. His employees used kinder words when he was nearby and more colorful ones when he was not. Adrian did not mind. He had never built his life around being liked. He had built it around certainty. That was why the letter from his late grandfather had irritated him so deeply. Richard Cole had died 6 months earlier at 89, leaving Adrian control of nearly everything except Hawthorne House, the family estate outside Boston where Adrian had spent the happiest summers of his childhood. The property was not merely valuable. It contained the foundation offices, an art collection assembled over 3 generations, and the gardens Adrian's grandmother had designed before she died. Adrian expected the estate to transfer automatically. Instead, his grandfather's attorney revealed a private condition. Adrian would receive full stewardship of Hawthorne House only if, before the annual foundation gala on December 20th, he could demonstrate that he had built a personal life capable of continuing the family legacy. The language did not literally require marriage, but Adrian interpreted it exactly that way. He had until December 20th to prove he was serious about building a family. If he failed, long-term control of the estate would pass to a charitable trust governed by an independent board. Claire had read the clause 3 times before telling him, "Your grandfather did not tell you to recruit a wife." Adrian had leaned back behind his desk. "He wants evidence that I'm building a family." "Yes. Marriage is evidence. So is emotional maturity, but I notice you didn't schedule interviews for that." Claire had worked for Adrian for 3 years, which made her one of the few people alive who could speak to him that way and remain employed. She was 31, raised in Vermont, educated at Northwestern, and possessed an extraordinary ability to identify problems before executives twice her age realized problems existed. She knew Adrian's calendar better than he did, remembered the names of employees' children, could dismantle a weak proposal with 3 polite questions, and never seemed impressed by his money. That last quality fascinated him more than he admitted. When Adrian decided to solve his grandfather's condition through a discreet matchmaking firm, Claire organized the process because organizing impossible things was part of her job. 43 candidates became 12 after background checks and compatibility assessments. 12 became 6 after private meetings. Every woman was accomplished, intelligent, socially polished, and fully aware that Adrian was considering marriage rather than casual dating. Claire made certain of that because she refused to let anyone be misled. Yet by the end of the first day, Adrian remembered almost nothing about the candidates' answers. He remembered Claire whispering sarcastic comments beside him. He remembered the way she tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear when concentrating. He remembered her correcting him when he asked one candidate where she saw herself in 5 years. "This is dinner, Adrian," Claire murmured. "Not a quarterly planning session." That evening, after the candidates left the Manhattan Hotel ballroom, Adrian found Claire collecting folders from the conference table. "Who would you choose?" he asked. She did not look up. For you? That was the question. None of them. Adrian stared at her. You selected them. I selected women who met the criteria you gave me. You asked for educated, independent, comfortable with public life, interested in philanthropy, and willing to consider an unconventional courtship. And none qualify? Claire finally looked at him. They qualify perfectly. That's the problem. Explain. She placed the folders down. You're treating marriage like an acquisition. You created specifications, found candidates, and expect logic to produce intimacy. Adrian folded his arms. You have a better method? Claire smiled faintly. Yes. Fall in love. The answer should have sounded naive. Instead, Adrian felt something shift quietly inside him because she said it as though love were not an unpredictable weakness but a decision worth making. And how exactly would you recognize it? He asked. Claire studied him for a second too long. You'd stop wondering whether someone fits your life and start wondering whether your life fits theirs. Then she picked up the folders and walked away. Adrian remained alone in the ballroom, watching the doors close behind her. For the first time since reading his grandfather's condition, he wondered whether he had misunderstood the entire challenge. 2 days later, he discovered something that made the question impossible to ignore. Claire had quietly submitted her resignation, effective December 21st, the morning after the deadline. Adrian found the letter by accident. Claire had placed it inside a folder marked Transition Planning, assuming he would review it after the week's candidate meetings. He opened it during breakfast in his penthouse and read the first sentence twice. Please accept this letter as formal notice of my resignation from Cole Meridian, effective December 21st. Adrian called her immediately. Claire answered on the 4th ring. Good morning. You're resigning. Silence. I was going to discuss it with you this afternoon. Discuss it now. I'm currently in a taxi. Then your taxi can hear. Claire sighed. This is exactly why people are afraid to resign from you. I am not frightening. You once made a senior vice president apologize to a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was correct. Despite himself, Adrian heard her laugh. It disappeared quickly. I've been offered a position in Seattle, she said. Chief Operating Officer for a nonprofit development group. Smaller organization, more responsibility, work I care about. Adrian stood at the windows overlooking Central Park. Double their offer. No, you don't know the number. It doesn't matter. That answer unsettled him more than the resignation itself. Adrian understood negotiations. Everyone had a number because everyone wanted something. Claire had just reminded him that what she wanted might not be something he could purchase. Why December 21st? Because I promised I'd get you through the gala and your grandfather's deadline. And then? Then you'll have a wife, apparently, and I'll have a new job. Something about hearing Claire place those two futures side by side made Adrian unexpectedly angry. We haven't finished selecting anyone. You have 4 excellent candidates left. You said none of them were right. I said your method was wrong. That doesn't mean the women are. Adrian looked at the resignation letter again. Cancel tonight's candidate dinner. Adrian. Cancel it. Why? He nearly answered because I want to have dinner with you instead. The words came so naturally that they alarmed him. Because I need to rethink the process. Claire was quiet. That might be the smartest decision you've made all week. She ended the call before he could respond. That afternoon Adrian attended meetings, approved a $220 million development agreement, rejected 2 acquisition proposals, and absorbed almost none of it. His attention kept returning to Claire's resignation. At 5:30 he walked out of his office and found her alone at her desk, shoes kicked discreetly beneath her chair while she reviewed foundation documents. Dinner, he said. Claire looked up. With whom? Me. That sounds ominous. I need your advice. You pay consultants significantly more than you pay me for advice. None of them tell me when I'm behaving like an idiot. Perhaps increase their performance incentives. 20 minutes later they were sitting in a small Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village that Claire chose specifically because Adrian had never been there. No private room. No security spectacle. No reservation under an assistant's name. They sat beside an exposed brick wall while a family celebrated a birthday 3 tables away. Adrian realized he could not remember the last time he had eaten somewhere without knowing the owner. Claire ordered pasta and sparkling water. Adrian copied her because the menu was handwritten and he had been distracted watching her relax. Without the office around them, she seemed different. Or perhaps he was finally looking properly. "Tell me about Seattle," he said. Claire's expression softened. The organization converts and used commercial buildings into affordable housing and community spaces. You could run something similar inside Cole Meridian. I could run your version of it. What does that mean? Your company does excellent philanthropic work, Adrian, but ultimately I would still be implementing your priorities. I want to discover mine. He understood the sentence intellectually. Emotionally, he disliked every word. So there is nothing I can offer that would make you stay? Claire twirled pasta around her fork. Why do you want me to? The obvious answer was because she was exceptional at her job. Adrian opened his mouth to say exactly that and stopped. Claire noticed. That's what I thought, she said softly. What did you think? That you don't actually know. Adrian leaned back. You're unusually comfortable criticizing your employer. Soon-to-be former employer. That is not helping. She smiled. Adrian felt the same strange pull he had experienced in the ballroom. Tell me something, he said. If you were one of the candidates, what would you ask me? Claire laughed. I would never be one of your candidates. Hypothetically. She considered it. I'd ask why you want a wife. I told you. Hawthorne House. Wrong answer. My grandfather's condition. Still wrong. Adrian frowned. Claire rested her hands on the table. A woman shouldn't marry you because you need to satisfy a clause. You should want her even if Hawthorne House disappears tomorrow. Adrian looked at her across the candlelit table. And if I found someone like that? Her smile faded slightly. Then you wouldn't need 43 candidates. The waiter arrived, interrupting them. But Adrian barely noticed. Claire's words had revealed the next piece of the puzzle. His grandfather's condition was not asking whether Adrian could find a suitable wife. It was asking whether he could recognize a life worth sharing. And for the first time, Adrian suspected the woman teaching him that lesson might be the same woman preparing to leave him. Over the following week, Adrian continued the matchmaking process because canceling it abruptly would embarrass women who had entered it sincerely. But the meetings changed. Instead of evaluating candidates, he listened. One candidate, a physician named Rebecca, asked him what he did on Sundays when no one needed anything from him. Adrian had no answer. Another asked when he had last changed a plan simply because someone he loved wanted something different. Again, no answer. Claire sat nearby taking notes, unaware that every question was leading Adrian back to her. On Friday, the final candidate meeting ended early. Adrian returned to headquarters and found Claire in a conference room arguing politely with the foundation's finance director about Hawthorne House. The community education program should remain funded regardless of the estate transfer, Claire said. The trust language allows it. Only if the incoming steward approves the allocation, the director replied. Then put the allocation into the December resolution before control changes. Adrian stopped outside the glass door. Claire was protecting a program his grandmother had created decades earlier, one that provided art scholarships for local students. Adrian had not asked her to do it. She simply knew it mattered. When the finance director left, Adrian entered. You're rewriting the foundation resolution. Claire closed her laptop. Improving it. Why? Because your grandmother's program shouldn't disappear because lawyers disagree about estate language. You never met my grandmother. No. But you talk about her differently from everyone else. Adrian went still. I barely talk about her. Exactly. Claire's gaze softened. You talk about acquisitions like you're giving a presentation. You talk about your grandfather like you're still trying to impress him. But when you mention your grandmother, you sound 12 years old again. No one had ever described him so accurately. Adrian looked through the conference room windows at Manhattan glowing below. She was the only person who never cared whether I succeeded. That's probably why you wanted her approval. She died when I was 17. Claire nodded. I know. Of course she knew. She knew the date because she had once rearranged his schedule when he quietly visited the cemetery every May. Adrian had never explained why. She had never asked. Come to Hawthorne House tomorrow, he said. Claire blinked. Why? I want to show you something. Is this related to work? Adrian thought about lying and decided not to. No, Claire studied him carefully. Then what is it related to? I don't know yet. The next morning they drove 90 minutes outside Boston after taking an early flight from New York. Hawthorne House stood on nearly 40 acres of rolling Massachusetts countryside, a stone mansion softened by ivy, maple trees, and gardens already touched by early winter. Claire had visited twice for foundation events but never privately. Adrian led her through the quiet house toward a sunroom overlooking the frozen garden. On one wall hung photographs of his grandparents throughout 54 years of marriage. Claire paused before a picture showing Richard Cole, decades younger, standing beside a laughing woman in muddy gardening gloves. Your grandmother? Eleanor. She looks happy. She usually was. Adrian opened an old writing desk and removed a small wooden box. Inside were letters. Hundreds of them. My grandfather wrote to her whenever business kept him away. Claire picked up one envelope without opening it. You kept these? He did. I found them after his death. Adrian hesitated. There's something I didn't tell you about the inheritance condition. Claire looked at him sharply. That sentence has never led anywhere good. There was a second page. Adrian. I didn't hide it intentionally. Her expression said she did not believe him. Adrian removed a folded copy from the box. The attorney originally gave me only the legal summary. I found the full letter later. Claire read silently. Richard had written that Hawthorne House should belong not to the heir who could preserve its value, but to the one who understood why it had mattered. The house, he wrote, had become a home because Eleanor had challenged every plan he made for it. She had rejected the formal gardens, opened the grounds to local families, created scholarships, and taught him that legacy was not possession but participation. The final sentence read that Adrian should not prove he could acquire a family. He should prove he could make room for one. Claire lowered the page. Your grandfather knew exactly what you would do. Adrian almost smiled. Apparently. He knew you'd turn love into a project. Apparently. Claire handed the letter back. So the wife interviews were never necessary. No, 43 women. I am aware. 3 spreadsheets. Claire. A compatibility scoring model. Adrian finally laughed. The sound echoed through the sunroom, surprising both of them. Claire smiled, and something inside Adrian became suddenly, terrifyingly clear. He did not want Claire because she fit a list. He wanted mornings in which she mocked his spreadsheets. He wanted arguments about gardens and foundation budgets. He wanted to know what Seattle looked like through her ambitions. He wanted to hear her laugh in rooms that had been too quiet for years. And that realization led him directly to the secret he had been avoiding: he had not fallen for Claire during the wife search. The search had merely forced him to notice that he had been slowly falling for her long before it began. Adrian did not confess. Not yet. Claire was still his employee, and the power imbalance mattered too much to ignore. Instead, when they returned to New York, he did something that confused everyone around him. He formally ended the matchmaking process. Each remaining candidate received a personal apology, reimbursement for every expense, and a charitable contribution to an organization of her choice. Then Adrian called Claire into his office. "I accepted your resignation." She stared at him. "You spent 2 weeks trying to stop it." "I changed my mind." "Why?" Adrian slid a signed letter across the desk confirming her final date and waiving every restrictive clause in her employment agreement. It also granted the performance bonus she had already earned, independent of whether she joined the Seattle organization. Claire read it twice. "You're making it very easy for me to leave." "Yes." Her eyes lifted. "That doesn't answer why." Adrian forced himself to remain calm. "Because if I ask you something important, I need to know you're free to say no." Claire became completely still. Adrian almost continued, but instinct told him the timing was wrong. She was still technically his assistant. She still had weeks left. "Ask me what?" she said. "Not yet." Frustration flashed across her face. "You cannot say something like that and then return to your email." "I can. That might be the most annoying billionaire sentence you've ever spoken. I'll add it to my annual review." Claire walked toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, ending the interviews was the right decision. "I know. And accepting my resignation was also right. That one hurt." "I know." She left. Adrian stared at the closed door and understood that doing the right thing did not guarantee the outcome he wanted. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he could not negotiate certainty. During Claire's final weeks, their relationship became simultaneously easier and more difficult. She trained her replacement, completed foundation planning, and prepared Adrian's calendar through January even though she would no longer be there to manage it. Adrian began noticing all the invisible ways she had shaped his life. She had scheduled 15-minute buffers after calls with his mother because she knew those conversations exhausted him. She sent handwritten congratulations to employees after promotions using his stationery, though he always signed them personally. She knew he preferred aisle seats, disliked breakfast meetings, and became quieter rather than louder when angry. But Adrian also discovered how little he knew about her. He had never seen the small Brooklyn apartment where she lived. He did not know she painted watercolor landscapes on weekends. He had not known her father repaired heating systems in Vermont or that her mother ran the town library. He had spent 3 years benefiting from Claire's attention without giving equal attention in return. So he began asking questions, cautiously and without turning them into another investigation. She noticed immediately. "Why do you suddenly care what books I read?" she asked over lunch one afternoon. "Because I realized I don't know." "You could have asked 3 years ago." "Yes." "Is this another grandfather lesson?" "No," Adrian looked at her. "This one is mine." Claire looked away first. December arrived. The foundation gala approached, and with it the deadline governing Hawthorne House. Adrian's attorneys informed him that he could present the full letter and request immediate recognition as steward. He refused. His grandfather had wanted evidence of change, not clever legal interpretation. Adrian instead proposed converting a portion of Hawthorne House into a permanent public arts and education center while preserving the family residence and gardens. He also created an independent board seat for the community program his grandmother founded. When Claire reviewed the proposal, she looked genuinely surprised. "You're giving up control. Sharing it. 3 months ago you would have considered those synonyms. 3 months ago I was interviewing wives using spreadsheets." Fair point. On the night before the gala, Claire stayed late to finalize the presentation. Snow began falling over Manhattan, softening the city beyond the windows. At 11:30, Adrian emerged from his office and found her standing beside her empty desk. Most of her personal belongings were already packed into 2 cardboard boxes. The sight hit him harder than expected. "Tomorrow is your last official event," he said. "Yes. Your flight to Seattle. December 23rd. 2 days after her resignation became effective." Adrian nodded. Claire touched the edge of one box. "You never asked your important question." "I know. Are you planning to wait until I'm on the airplane?" "No, good. Because that would be dramatically inefficient." Adrian smiled. Then the smile faded. "Claire, did you know?" "Know what?" "That I was falling in love with you." Silence transformed the room. Claire did not move. Adrian had delivered billion-dollar proposals with less difficulty. "I didn't," he continued, "which is embarrassing considering how often I claim to notice everything." Claire's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "Adrian. You don't have to answer." "Then why tell me?" "Because silence would be another way of trying to control the outcome." He stepped closer but left several feet between them. "I ended the search because every conversation with those women made me understand what I actually wanted. I accepted your resignation because I refuse to make your career dependent on how you respond to this. Your bonus is guaranteed. Your recommendation is already sent. Nothing changes professionally because of what I'm saying now." Claire stared at him. "You planned the ethical structure of your love confession." Adrian exhaled. "Unfortunately, I am still me." She laughed through the emotion in her face. "Thank God." Adrian's heart stumbled. Claire looked toward the snow outside. "Do you know why I applied for Seattle?" "You wanted something that belonged to you." "That was part of it." She turned back. "The other part was you." Adrian said nothing. "I knew about the wife search before you officially told me because the matchmaking firm sent the first contract to my inbox. I sat at this desk reading descriptions of the women you wanted, and every requirement sounded like things you already expected from me. Smart. Independent. Comfortable challenging you. Interested in philanthropy. Able to survive your schedule." Adrian's expression changed. Claire continued. "And I realized I had become important to your life without ever being important in the way I wanted." "Claire, let me finish." He did. "I wasn't angry that you wanted to marry someone. I was angry at myself because watching you search made me understand that I had feelings for you, and staying here while you chose someone else would eventually make me resent a job I used to love." Adrian felt the entire story rearrange itself. "So you were leaving because you loved me?" Claire gave him a sad smile. "I was leaving because I didn't think you could." That was the secret hidden at the center of the absurd wife search. Adrian had believed he was searching for a woman capable of sharing his life while the woman beside him had already imagined leaving because she loved him too much to remain invisible inside it. He took one careful step closer. "And now?" Claire's eyes met his. "Now I don't know." It was not the answer Adrian wanted, but it was honest. "Then I won't ask you to stay." "You won't?" "No, that is unexpectedly mature. I've had excellent administrative support." She smiled. Adrian continued. "Go to Seattle if that is the life you want. Take the job. Build something that belongs to you. If there is any possibility for us, I want it to exist because we choose each other, not because one of us sacrifices the future to make it convenient." Claire studied him for a long moment. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "A first date." Her eyebrows rose. "After 3 years, 43 wife candidates, an estate crisis, and a declaration of love, your plan is dinner." "I've been informed that marriage interviews are ineffective." Claire laughed. "Dinner where?" "You choose." "Saturday. 7. Adrian nodded. "I'll be there." And Adrian? Yes. No private dining room. Their first date took place 2 nights later at a neighborhood restaurant in Brooklyn where Adrian waited 20 minutes because Claire deliberately refused to let his driver pick her up. They talked for 4 hours. Not about Cole Meridian. Not about Hawthorne House. They talked about childhood, failure, books, terrible vacations, and what each of them thought a good life actually looked like. Adrian learned Claire wanted Seattle because the organization would allow her to build housing programs at a scale that mattered. Claire learned Adrian secretly dreamed of restoring the abandoned greenhouse at Hawthorne House because his grandmother had taught him to grow tomatoes there. At the end of the evening, Adrian walked her 6 blocks home through light snow. At her building, neither seemed willing to end the night. "This is strange," Claire said. "What is?" "You without an agenda." "I have an agenda." "Of course you do. I would like a second date." Claire smiled. "That can be arranged." He did not kiss her. He wanted to, but the moment felt too new to rush. Instead he touched her hand briefly and said goodnight. Claire went upstairs smiling. Adrian stood on the sidewalk for several seconds afterward, feeling richer than he had after any business deal in his life. The foundation gala arrived the following week. Hawthorne House glowed beneath thousands of warm lights while nearly 300 guests gathered inside. Adrian presented his new stewardship proposal to the foundation board. He spoke without slides. Claire noticed immediately. He described his grandmother's gardens, his grandfather's letters, and the mistake of believing legacy meant protecting something from change. Then he announced that Hawthorne House would become partly public, with expanded scholarships, community programs, and independent oversight. "My grandfather asked me to prove I could make room for a family," Adrian told the board. "I misunderstood him. Family is not something a person acquires when the timing becomes convenient. It is the collection of people whose dreams you learn to make room for alongside your own." Claire stood near the back of the room, suddenly unable to look anywhere else. The board approved the plan unanimously. Afterward, Richard Cole's attorney approached Adrian with a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather instructed me to give you this only if you voluntarily surrendered exclusive control of the estate." Adrian opened it. Inside was one sentence in Richard's handwriting: "Now you understand why your grandmother was the smartest decision I never made." Adrian laughed quietly. Across the ballroom, he found Claire watching him. She crossed the room. "Well. Apparently my grandfather has been manipulating me from beyond the grave. Efficient man." Adrian handed her the note. Claire read it and smiled. "He would have liked you," Adrian said. "Your grandfather?" "My grandmother." Claire's expression softened. "I wish I could have met her." "So do I." Music began in the ballroom. Couples moved toward the floor. Adrian looked at Claire. "Dance with me." "Is that an instruction?" "A request." "You're learning." She placed her hand in his. They danced slowly beneath the lights while snow gathered beyond the windows. There was no announcement, no engagement, no dramatic declaration for the guests. Their relationship did not belong to the foundation board or the newspapers. It belonged to them. Near the end of the song, Claire said quietly, "I'm still going to Seattle." Adrian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly before relaxing. "I know. You're not going to try to stop me?" "No, good." She looked at him. "Because I turned down the permanent position." Adrian blinked. "What?" Claire smiled at his rare loss of composure. "I negotiated a 6-month consulting arrangement instead. I'll spend part of each month there helping launch the housing program, then decide what I want long term." "When did you decide that?" "Before our first date." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to see whether you meant what you said about letting me choose." Adrian stared at her. "That was a test. Compatibility assessment." "You mocked my compatibility assessment." "Mine only had one candidate." Adrian laughed. This time Claire laughed with him. 6 months later, spring returned to Hawthorne House. The greenhouse had been restored, though Adrian's first tomatoes were performing badly enough that Claire claimed they were evidence billionaires should not be trusted with agriculture. The Public Arts Center opened in the East Wing. Scholarship applications doubled. Claire completed the Seattle project and founded her own development advisory firm, with Cole Meridian becoming one client among several rather than her employer. The arrangement gave her exactly what she had wanted, work that belonged to her. It also gave their relationship room to become something neither had to hide behind job titles. They learned each other slowly. Adrian learned that Claire needed quiet when upset and coffee before conversation in the morning. Claire learned that Adrian became absurdly competitive at board games and secretly watched old black and white movies when he could not sleep. They disagreed about schedules, travel, furniture, and whether a greenhouse required a spreadsheet. It did. Claire refused to admit it. On a warm June evening, Adrian found her in the garden reading one of his grandfather's letters on a bench beneath the maple trees. Stealing family correspondence, he asked. Research. For what? Understanding why every Cole man apparently requires an intelligent woman to explain his own emotions to him. Adrian sat beside her. That sounds statistically unsupported. Claire closed the letter. How were your wife interviews today? He gave her a look. She still teased him about them whenever he became too serious. Terrible. Candidate number 44 is difficult. High maintenance. Extremely. Expensive taste. She once made me eat pizza from a place that didn't accept reservations. Scandalous. Adrian took her hand. She also changed my life. Claire's expression softened. There was no urgency between them now. No deadline. No inheritance condition. No board waiting for proof. Adrian reached into his jacket, and Claire immediately narrowed her eyes. Adrian. Relax. Those are famous last words from a billionaire. He pulled out a small folded sheet of paper rather than a ring. Claire unfolded it. At the top he had written, Compatibility Assessment, Candidate 44. Beneath it were 3 questions. Does she challenge me? Constantly. Does she have a life of her own? Absolutely. Can I imagine building a future without trying to control hers? I'm learning. At the bottom was one final line, would I choose her if there were no estate, no deadline, no expectations, and nothing to gain? Every time. Claire looked up with tears brightening her eyes. You made me a spreadsheet without the spreadsheet. Personal growth. She laughed and leaned her head against his shoulder. Adrian looked toward Hawthorne House, its windows glowing in the evening light. Months earlier he had believed the mansion was the prize and marriage was the requirement for winning it. Now the idea seemed almost ridiculous. Hawthorne House had never needed a billionaire capable of owning it. It had needed someone willing to understand what made a house worth keeping. Claire had taught him that without ever trying to become part of the lesson. There's one more question, Adrian said. That sounds dangerous. It isn't marriage. Claire looked amused. You realize most women would find that clarification disappointing. You are not most women. Correct answer. Adrian squeezed her hand. Come with me to Vermont next weekend. She blinked. Why? I want to meet your parents. Claire stared at him with such surprise that he wondered whether he had finally managed to shock her. You want to meet my father? Yes. The man who still thinks billionaires are people who charge too much rent. I own hotels, not his apartment. He will not care about the distinction. Good. My mother will show you childhood photographs. Excellent. There is one where I'm 8 and missing both front teeth. I'm prepared to negotiate for a copy. Claire laughed and kissed his cheek. All right. Vermont. Adrian smiled. It was a small decision compared with the ones that had once filled his days. No lawyers were required. No board approval. No financial model. Yet it felt more significant than almost anything he had signed. A year earlier, Adrian Cole would have described love as something fortunate people discovered after every practical condition had been satisfied. Now he understood it differently. Love was not the reward at the end of a perfectly controlled plan. It was the person who made the plan worth changing. He had begun his search believing he needed to choose a wife before a deadline. Instead, the search had revealed a truth hiding in plain sight: the woman who understood his silences, challenged his certainty, protected what mattered to him, and demanded room for her own dreams had been beside him all along. Claire had never applied for the position. She had never competed for his attention. She had never needed his fortune. That was precisely why Adrian finally understood what his grandfather had been trying to teach him. The right woman was not the one who fit perfectly into the life he had already built. She was the one whose presence made him brave enough to build a different life with her. As the evening settled over Hawthorne House, Claire stood and pulled him toward the greenhouse to inspect another row of failing tomatoes. Adrian followed willingly, leaving his phone unanswered on the bench behind him. For once, there was nowhere more important he needed to be.